Thanks so much, Maya. You shared a lot of interesting information about how you are coming from a country which is designated country, and you made your whole career in aerospace, and you are trying your best to make a positive change and open up doors for the generations to come. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I
of
have
course.
some questions on, for example, your TEDx talk. So as you said, as you got involved in MIT GAQ and realized this is a bigger problem, so how did you think of like, okay, like what is the right platform to, voice this opinion? And were there any other channels then or now which you are aware of, which people can go to if they want to do something similar?
Yeah. One thing that I really learned, I think, is that a lot of these opportunities are like a domino effect. When the really all these policies that happened throughout the pandemic were taking place, starting to happen, a lot of media outlets were reaching out to MIT and universities similar to MIT to see how to get stories of students, to get stories of people affected. And it happened because I was in that position that I was able to get in touch with these, media reporters, was able to start there. And when I shared my story through the first platforms, folks from TEDx, folks from different, other places reached out to me to share further parts of the story, to make it into other advocacy and empowerment tools. So a lot of the work that I did ended up being not fully planned on what platforms I want, but it happened more so an effect of someone listening to stories, someone listening to reading a media article on it, and then it opened up different opportunities. So one thing that I realized is saying yes to opportunities was the way that helped me get other ones, because I was very hesitant at the beginning, especially as an international student on a visa, of what if I said something that, might put my visa situation in jeopardy? What if me criticizing the regulations and policies are something that's gonna, put my status in jeopardy? But I realized at that point I was that close
Yeah.
for all of us to be deported anyway because of what's going on, and I felt I could lose my entire PhD, could lose everything. So that motivated me, despite the fear, to do it, to kind of speak up in these stories. But I'd say being involved in student organizations and universities is one of the best way, if you're a student, to get into similar platforms. I know MIT and a lot of other universities have, for example, DC offices here. So we have policy representation. So it has some ability to push and make an impact when we tell these stories to policymakers, to offices. So but being part of these student organizations will give you the voice to be able to be the representative and talk to these entities. So this is one way that I found these platforms that people could access it through. And one last comment I'll make on this is, through SGAC and through a lot of different conferences are happening at the moment. This topic of DEI in space, specifically when it comes to internationals, is growing. And being part of attending these conferences, meeting people at the conferences, being able to be part of panels on the conference and talking about them is a huge step as well. And this will open up other opportunities as you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I just wanted to highlight that the thing is, like, everybody gets scared of like voicing out about these issues. Firstly, they feel like maybe I'm the only one and other people are not feeling. And then the second stage is when they realize that, okay, there are more people also, but I am the only one like talking about it. It can harm my status.
Yep.
So I see that most of international students and working professionals, they have kind of accepted it. They are like, okay, if I want to go in aerospace, I have to somehow do my own visa, green card, and everything, because the employers are not going to do
Yeah.
it. And then that again, like, enhances that kind of like unintentional bias, because you showed that job listing requirement, right?
Yeah.
The will talk about being an equal opportunity employer, but they will say you need a security clearance, you need a citizenship, or things like
Yeah.
that. And then almost like 98% of the jobs are just straight out of our way. So
Yeah.
then I have seen people, I've seen my friends like thinking about their master's or PhD thesis topics in a way where they can branch out to other fields and don't have to stay in aerospace. And that is a sad thing because like when they are studying in aerospace in US universities, universities are giving them a stipend. They are investing in their training and experiments, you know, things like that. And when after graduation, they are all set to contribute in the field, they
Exactly.
are, yeah, they are just,
Yeah.
nobody realizes that this is a discrimination happening,
Yeah.
even if you say that you are not doing it.
And
So,
yeah, and the tough part there is, I've seen so many of friends go to mechanical engineering, to different things just to have more broad. But the tough part in the US, according to the rules, if you study aerospace engineering, you cannot work in a
yeah.
field that's different than what you studied.
Mhm.
So, you're being trained, and not only you need to branch out somewhere else, you cannot branch out because,
Yeah.
you have to have the similar field of study. So, it definitely, the discrimination is a lot in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of like affects the productivity of these students also in the most important years of their career. For example, during the first years of PhD, okay, they are given a project. For example, I was also lucky enough to work on a project funded by NASA, and I was all happy and that wow, I got my dream project with dream company. But then later on, when it was actually my time to make an impact, then I realized, oh, I can't work at NASA because I don't have a citizenship. And most of the, like I was in hypersonics, and so many people around me, they had like directly gone to either CS or electrical, software dominated fields. So,
Yeah. Yeah. A
yeah.
bit,
So
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to say that it's important for people to at least voice out these opinions and let the employers know, let the policymakers know that this is a problem. And of course, at the time, there may not seem any solution. They may feel like, oh, this is how it is working. But then later on, there are other employers who do the visa process for their employers. And certainly in any organization, if you design the projects with keeping in mind that, okay, we want to hire certain number of people without citizenship, and let's come up with some projects like that, which are not too sensitive, but they can be useful.
The problem from a policy perspective is when it comes to export control regulations in ITAR in particular, which are the different levels for those not familiar of, again, export control in the US when it comes to space technologies. A lot of it ends up, having some same company works on some defense related issues, some etc. So there are extra levels of complication when it comes to export control. But the big issue is the current ITAR structure is very ambiguous, and the price you pay if you do something wrong that does not qualify within these ITAR regulations is too intense as an institution, as an organization, as a company. So you end up a lot of times going the easy path of, as a company, you would say, I'm going to label everything as ITAR,
Yeah.
I'm going to label everything as AAR. I'm going to do all this. And if I label everything as ITAR, that would be my easy way to protect myself as an employer. I wouldn't have to, deal with any complications that come out of it if I want to hire international students. And this is a problem because of the ambiguous aspects of the regulations and laws. And also the fact that a lot of companies can do this hiring. It's just extra paperwork. It's just, you could apply for an export control license and let the government decide, but you don't want to go through this process if you can hire an American for an easier route. So there are a lot of complications, but there's a lot of possible ways forward that people don't talk about.
Yeah, certainly there are ways. So we just need to voice this out so that employers know that we want this.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyways, I think Anthony has a question.
Fine.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
First of all, the lecture was, top notch. It was excellent, and I want to thank, of course, Maya and you, Durgesh. And I'm very happy to see someone from my country, reach these heights with NASA and MIT and Harvard. And I may have faced the same problem or same difficulties, let's say, working with, you know, some type of space technology. And I've seen the missions that you have been involved with. I've been, you know, like monitoring NASA, what is it doing for the past you know, 20 years since I graduated, almost from, you know, middle school, let's say, since I had the dream to become a rocket scientist. And yes, well, you mentioned about export control, ITER. I've been facing this for the past few years, you know, since I graduated from my master's. And well, especially, well, it's not only space technology, but also I work with like some type of critical technology related to space and to you know, to aeronautics. But you know, everything goes at ease, you know, because every time there is some, I'll talk about a little bit of regulations. So everybody, there is some type of new regulations that become more, you know, sinusoidal, let's say, it might goes up and down sometimes, and you might want to, you know, talk to someone, you know, that could ease things up for you to get involved with those type of projects.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the first impression, or for the, you know, let's say, you know, what is being said by those policymakers, yeah, it is like, it's almost forbidden for an international to work with space technology. But you know, when your dream is big, nothing is impossible. Like Maya said, and how she, you know, went through her path through MIT, from SHUF to you know, to being a doctor from MIT. So I agree with what she said. I'm very proud that someone from my country, and you know, almost my age, like a little bit younger, you know, to reach those you know, those ambitions that you know, we have them, and like a lot of people have them, but she tackled it, you know, in a very special way. I'm very pleased, and you know, it's a pleasure we met, even if it's online. But you know, we'll have the chance to do it like live one day. And well, thanks. And if you have some questions for me, Maya or Durgesh, like I'm ready if you want to ask me. I have a mechanical engineering degree also from Lebanon, from Notre Dame, but I didn't have the chance, you know, I come from middle class family, and we didn't have the chance, you know, to send my father sent me back when I graduated from high school back to go to the US. But I did it from Notre Dame, and it's also the Maybach Credit School. Then I traveled to Brazil, to Sao Paulo, to the most prestigious school, you know, in Latin America. It's called Technological Institute of Aeronautics, and I made my master's there. I finished in 2017. And I've been working on those technologies by myself, you know, to pitch them to, you know, to the big players. So if you want to have some questions, you know, within the let's say top secret limits, like I can answer, or about myself, I can answer it, Maya or Durgesh.
Yeah, and thanks so much, Antoine. A pleasure to meet you and to hear your story as well. This is always great to hear people who are able to still pursue things within the different limitations. I do want to make sure, you know, within the conversation that we point out some of the solutions. We always talk about the problems and the challenges, and as important it is to voice out these challenges, I do want to point out that there are ways to be able to get access to things, to be able to, they're not easy ways, but there are some ways, there's some growing efforts. Yeah. And I want to make sure everyone on, you know, at least on the call or who would be listening to this afterwards, be able to access these opportunities. So one big important thing to mention is the access through academic institutions is one of the best ways to be able to tackle things. So if you're interested in research, if you're a graduate researcher, undergrad, or faculty, postdoc, etc., through academic institutions, there's a lot of projects where you could still focus on the science aspect of things, you can still focus on the data part of things, you can still focus on different parts of missions and projects and ideas that would already have been filtered through to become accessible to academic institutes. That said, even within those, there will be limitations. Throughout my projects, you know, I had to be on different, say, mailing lists. There's many meetings that I cannot attend or be part of. There's certain labs that I cannot access. That said, I was still able to access a big part of the mission. So it's not always perfect, but academic institutions do have a lot of possibilities to access things. There's also a big growing effort with different commercial companies right now, especially commercial companies that have different offices in Europe and in other places. And that for them, it's an incentive for their workers from Europe, for example, to come to the US and be able to work in the space sector. So they don't want to limit it for all internationals. So I can give you examples of those. Planet Labs in San Francisco and Colorado, Loft Orbital in Colorado and San Francisco. These are companies that have a lot of international offices, and these are companies that are hiring. There's a few number of more additional, routes that different commercial companies are taking to allow internationals to access these companies. So one thing that I did throughout MIT's, my work at MIT is create a database of companies that have hired internationals and that have contacts from MIT that work there. This mailing list or this database was specifically targeted for MIT students because it had names of MIT alumni, but I think we should build on it to at least make the database of the companies without the contacts of the people, to make that database accessible to people. And the last thing I'll say on this is networking is one of the most important pieces of being able to get these jobs, because as Antoine mentioned, and as was said before, a lot of times you can get the paperwork, you can get the job, even if it's advertised as only accessible to US citizens. That said, you'd need someone advocating for you and who really wants you to get that job to be willing to do the paperwork. That doesn't apply for all places. Obviously, NASA and others have extra limitations, but there's a lot of companies which allow that. And this is where going to conferences, being able to reach out to people who you think, could help, who you want to talk and know your story, and let them know who you are, let them know what interests you have, what opportunities, you're interested in. And then that could open up the doors later on. So these, I think, are a few tips of things that normally work within the aerospace sector.
Mm-hmm.
I also saw a few questions directly on the chat that were not public, so I'm going to answer one of them here from Sansti Najm. If I considered, after the discrimination in the US, considered other countries, and aerospace engineering is romanticized, so how much of a burden would be to be international? Yeah, so I think when it comes to other countries, the problem is this is not a US problem. This is an international wide problem. If you go to Europe, you want to work at ESA, you need to be from the European countries. If you, it kind of really limits you for these regulations, limits you for each country to their own regulations on what's happening. That said, in the Arab world, there is growth in UAE. There's some efforts in even Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, and some Arab countries, and making this, making their space program grow further. In Europe, there's also a similar tendency. I'm not sure about my current, track. There is chance that later on I might consider, more European opportunities. At the moment, though, discrimination-wise, it's going to be similar everywhere. So I wouldn't be escaping one to go to a better place in that regard. But in my opinion, or when I picked the US, I thought in the space sector, it offered me the best opportunities. My interests were in deep space exploration and in space policy. And the US is leading a lot of efforts in these two main topics. So career-wise, it was a smarter choice for me, but there are opportunities in other places. And yeah, aerospace and space in general is very romanticized. It's an incredible, inspiring area and topic of work, but the nitty-gritty details are a lot less romantic and a lot less shiny and bright than what we'd like to think when we get into the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing about all this. And it's very useful to learn more, ways of sustaining a career in aerospace, because as we look at the poll, I see that most of the people, they want to stay in aerospace if they have studied aerospace. And there are some candidates who are like not able to get a citizenship because they are coming from designated countries. There was a member who just left the Zoom call because of some meetings. She is actually coming from Iran, and she is one of the executive team members at WeLEAP. And she had to do a double PhD in order to be able to be in US and work. So right now she is doing her second PhD and gotten involved with projects funded by NASA and other reputed institutions. So I just wanted to highlight, like, even like people dream, like the big dreamers come in aerospace and they go to all extent that, okay, I really want to work on this project, even if I have to do a second PhD, or I have to like keep working, keep improving myself, keep making myself more suitable. But even then, like when there are no opportunities or if there is a discrimination, it's very disappointing. So it's great that like people are getting more aware of it, and efforts led by you, Maya, and then also other policymakers, people who are making all these organizations. It's very useful, and like it's making people's dream true. So thanks.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, it's again one thing that the more awareness we bring into it, and the more, I mean, it's really a mutual benefit kind of thing. Because the US, as one example, and this applies to Europe and other places as well, is investing a lot of resources in you as a student, for example, to be trained, to learn, to be part of all of these efforts. So if you learn everything and go use that in a different country, again, from a national interest perspective, that is not great for the country. So there is an element of mutual benefit that needs to be constantly highlighted when it comes to these opportunities and these regulations. And the problem is ITAR as a law, it's really hard to change. To be able to get, congressional members to make that change in ITAR, it might happen. I'm not denying it might not happen, but it is better to, within the constraints of what happens in ITAR, be able to convince companies that, hey, even if this is happening, not everything is dual use.
Right.
Not everything is not accessible. Even if you're working on certain missions, you could make parts of your work that are more science-based, that are more data-based, that would be really a lot of times made public data-wise to the people, to be accessed for everyone. You don't need to have the same regulations for everyone in your company. So there are a lot of, routes. It's just about standing up to anyone that says, hey, it's impossible, and being like, if you put some work into it, it can actually happen.
Yeah, exactly. Like the employers don't want to go that extra mile. And one of the ways we can also voice these out, like these kind of suggestions to employers and the policymakers, is AIAA congressional visit days, where like even students or young professionals, if they are an AIAA member, they can volunteer. And these are annual 2 to 3 days where people will be visiting congressional offices and highlighting some of the key challenges in aerospace for that year. So AIAA definitely asks their volunteer to come up with, well, okay, what are the issues you feel? And I have participated in these congressional visit days. So that was very satisfying that at least I was able to, convey this to the office. And they
for sure.
do something or not, but at least I voiced out my opinion. And when more and more people do it, that will be taken care of, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, as we see, priorities of different, there's a lot happening around the world, and it tends to be a lot of things. Maybe rightly so, priority-wise and comparison pushed back. That said, these things are not new. These things have been taking place for years and years and years, and really voices of internationals are growing. And this is something that is very helpful for everyone to be part of and to voice, for, again, mutual benefit for everyone involved. And I do want to point out, similar to AIAA congressional visit days, a lot of different universities have similar programs internal to the universities. Back to MIT, because I know more about it, we have MIT CVD, so you can participate and go to different, throughout the MIT DC office, be able to go and meet with congressional offices, and voice the problems and concerns that you are having as a student. So make use of these opportunities. There are ways to voice things out.
And lastly, I wanted to ask a little bit more about your involvement in United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs. For example, what do they do? How did you get involved? And what is your current role there? And how are you planning to do in coming years? What is in your plan?
Yeah, so for UNOOSA, I mainly was part of the UNOOSA Space for Women program. And this is an incredible program to really focus on bringing a lot more opportunities, a lot more awareness for biases and discrimination for women in the space sector globally. I really would recommend anyone to be able to go on the website and see who the mentors are and be able to participate as a mentee or apply as a mentee. Because you can get advice from real experts in the field and you could be mentored by them for a certain duration of time. In my experience, we had a number of seminars and calls with a lot of incredible women from all across the world in the space sector. And we would gather around the room, and the room was, again, not just women. It had women and men and everyone to really make sure that everyone is aware of these biases and discrimination, because we're not going to be able to make a change unless everyone's aware of it. And be able to hear the voices of different women and how they navigated their story to the space world, like how they reached the point where they are. And that was very helpful in shaping the way that, hey, there's so many different, paths that you can take to get somewhere. And there's many different challenges along the way. And this is one way to tackle them or handle them. So that's the UNOOSA Space for Women program. Again, I would recommend folks to check it out and to apply as mentees, and maybe, who knows, mentors as well if you are an expert within the space world. It's an incredible program. The other aspect that I mentioned with the Space Generation Advisory Council is as part of that organization, you also have the chance to present your work to UNOOSA meetings. So there are certain meetings. For example, last year we presented the work that we're doing overall in space law policy. And I think there's a lot of different, areas of work that UNOOSA, UN COPIUS have different, the Committee of Peaceful Use of Outer Space have different meetings. And you could, as part of SGAC, be potentially one of the people that present your work and present your results and your contributions to the UN as well. So there are aspects of participation there.
Mm-hmm.
Again, how quick of an impact here this is going to have, it's the UN, but it's one way to voice your work more, to bring visibility to what your issues, to your contributions, to the ideas that you have. But expect things to be slower on that side as one could expect. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, one of the points I had noticed is about, like, if there are many scholarships, fellowships available in aerospace, but then maximum of those are for US citizens. So then how can international students come up with, like, more ideas to which might be funded? How should they think about it? Was there something you did, like, when you were navigating through your, like, undergrad to graduate studies, and, like, you had to come up with a thesis topic or something? Are there
Yeah. Yeah, so that was a big problem, and similar to what I was talking about, the database of companies that, we created for internationals. I created another database of scholarships and of fellowships that people could apply for. There is a number of fellowships specifically for women, international women in aerospace. So I am an Amelia Earhart, Zonta Amelia Earhart Fellow. So I would very much recommend the Zonta Amelia Earhart Fellowship for people. It's mainly, I think a lot of these fellowships are targeted for PhDs. I think a bit less for master's level students. There's another fellowship that really is focused for people who want to go back home, though, that one. So it's focused about people who want to take their learning and study, but they have a plan to go to their home countries and make something there. So you could send a proposal of what you have, you can send your application, and they will fund you in that regard. I know AIAA has some options as well that are not fully US citizen limited. But again, the chances are way lower overall, and the options are way lower. So I was lucky enough that my project funded me throughout my research throughout my grad school experience. So I did some teaching and I did some different fellowship work on the side, but I was able to still get my funding through my research. That said, these few fellowships are available. There's also few universities that recognize that. We pushed a lot, we advocated a lot at MIT to even allow for funding for certain periods of certain semesters and sometimes as a starting student, especially for internationals who navigate, for example, change of topics and change of advisors, change of labs, etc., when they don't have the fund and that they cannot apply for the fund to begin with. Some universities are guaranteeing funding for such occasions for international students who are in a state of limbo, especially because according to US laws and visas, you have to, it's not just because you want to have a salary and be able to pay your rent. Legally, you need to be having funding. You cannot be unfunded throughout certain periods. So MIT, for example, recognized that it's not perfect, but there are some steps in that regard that universities are doing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. So actually, before Shabnam left, she had a question and like comment and questions. I will read it to you and you can answer. So she says, thanks for your great presentation. I have a question with your JPL experience. Could you please explain about the procedure you did to be able to work there? Was there also some restrictions for international students?
Yeah, so JPL is one of the really unique centers, NASA centers, that allows in some areas internationals to work. JPL does allow, at an internship level, it's a tad harder because there's a lot of paperwork that needs to be done, and they wouldn't a lot of times want to put all this effort if you're just there for 2 months or 3 months. That said, one of the worst part about it is that they hire mainly most of their interns. So like, if you are not able to get an internship, your chances are lower because you weren't able to do that. So it's kind of a catch-22 kind of process. But they do have opportunities for internationals and internships, especially again, if you know someone that wants you to be there, that they want to hire you. There are two aspects of JPL that I want to highlight. One being they have a program that allows people to, if you have your own funding from a university, be able to continue your research there, funded by your university. So if you're a grad student doing research on landing or like navigation for landing, and you want to work within the team at JPL that's doing entry, descent, landing, and navigation for landing on Mars, for example, you could convince your advisor to say, hey, can you, within this amount of money that you're going to pay me for the summer, pay me that, but while I was working at JPL, within the same field of work that will still contribute to my thesis. So there are many students that do that type of work. And the other part is for undergrads, there's a program called SURF. SURF is a summer undergraduate research fellowship, something like that. It's a Caltech program, but as an international, you can't work at JPL with it, but you can work on a ton of JPL projects from Caltech. So you could still go to Pasadena, you could still like be there, meet the people in Pasadena, etc. But you could work at Caltech on these projects without being necessarily at JPL's campus. So that's another option. That said, for everything I just mentioned, if you're from the list of designated countries, you will not be able to get hired there. So that's something to be aware of. And they do hire internationals for full-time jobs. Again, not from designated list, but they do hire internationals. So it's a very unique location, and it's a great opportunity for any internationals who are not limited and restricted by the list of countries to apply to and consider. My approach to JPL is I was able to work there at some point before the rules get stricter, so I was able to still access, and then following that I lost my ability to be there on campus and work, so I was accessing all my work and projects through MIT, through different projects, through different academic institutions. And one thing that I did realize over the time is my only way to get there is by getting a green card. And I went through a different route of legal processes to go that direction to be able to work there. But this should be a lot easier for someone who doesn't have the restrictions. So it definitely is an option.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I was also able to do my internship at NASA when I was a PhD student, and because my PhD project was a part, like the internship was a part of the PhD project. So then after graduation, there were some open positions which were very, very suitable for me, and like my mentors at NASA, they asked me to apply, but again, there were citizenship restrictions. And then the other thing is also like some of the NASA branches do hire internationals and they do the visa and everything, but again, it depends on which country you come from. So for example, the EB2 category visa, it's really hard to get for Indians and Chinese students. It's like 10 to 12 years of wait time. But for other countries, like for example, Nepal and most of the European countries, they get it within 2 to 3 years, or even 1 year if it is. So there are options. Again, like coming from a particular country also makes it harder.
Exactly.
But the only thing we can do is like keep trying.
Exactly. And being aware, like a lot of times when we talk about these discrimination issues, we lump everyone together as foreign nationals versus US citizens. And the really bad understanding that a lot of people have is you can't lump all foreign nationals together. There's so many categories and so many nuances and so many different things for different people that even, faculty in universities and career centers and universities are not aware of and cannot advise on and don't have the details about. So I struggled with that a lot, even at places like MIT, and finding people who can help me navigate the process, because faculty and otherwise don't know the extent of these regulations, don't know these details. So this is where calls like this and sessions like this would help, bring more light to these specific nuances.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important for to make people sensitized about this stuff, because most of the time they don't know that what stress we are going through. For example, they know that, okay, NASA hires international, so what is your problem? But they don't know, like, okay, there are like further complicated things with that. Even if they hire, then there are restrictions. Like, for example, if you are a fresh PhD student versus if you have exhausted your OPT, if you are picked in H1 lottery or not. So things like that.
Exactly. One thing I do want to point out, again, back to the whole solutions, conversation. Aside from JPL, so NASA overall, it's really hard to work with as an international. JPL has some options. There is one other route, which is contractors for NASA centers. So very limited opportunities. They don't always work, but there are many NASA centers that have external contractors. Ames, for example, has a lot of such contractors that they work with. So if you Google NASA contractors list for a specific center of interest, you might be able to find some contractors that would allow you to work on these projects. And sometimes they would state if they are citizens only or US citizens only or not. So you could further try your luck there. Again, it's not always possible, but I've seen people who have gone through this process through contracting.
Yeah, correct. Okay, I have a student, Swarupa. I think she is SM Aerospace Engineering. And Swarupa, do you have a question? Would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question? And also like talk a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I am Swarupa. So I'm currently pursuing masters in physics, and I kind of plan to switch over to do SM aerospace engineering. So I'm from India right now, but I've planned to do my further grad studies in US. So I have a research experience of working in a few startups, and I am currently working on my master's thesis, which is related to physics as well as aerospace, and my bachelor's thesis was this also kind of based on MIT's Pierce-Losh experiment that was conducted in ISS. Um, so I wanna ask you, how should I go about the grad applications process, or like anything to do to make my CV, I wouldn't say CV better, but like I want to get more research experience, but I'm not sure how to go about it so that I want to make my profile overall better.
Yeah. No, that's a great question, and I'm glad you're able to do that within your research so far and your thesis. One of the main things that helps for grad applications in general, this applies wherever you are, is reaching out to the faculty and the professors and having meetings with them or calls with them, for them to have a sense of who you are, have a face to the name, have a voice to the name, have an understanding more personal level of who you are, and having chatted with you and talked with you. A lot of grad applications come by receiving all these batches of applications. There's some limiting, I guess, cutoffs. So if your GPA is way too low, or if your exam on like GRE or so is way too low, there are certain cutoffs that, we will reduce the number of applications on a first run through. But then there are committees in most universities that basically say, according to your personal letter that you write about why you're applying, etc., will, I guess, give these applications to the different faculty that they think are best per what you are applying for. And if you've already talked to the faculty that they're giving them the applications, within, when they're sorting out through these lists of applications, they can be like, oh, I've talked to this person. They seem really interesting. They seem that their work is very valuable to my lab. And this is a human nature. If you know a name and you know a person, you know everything, there is a chance that you trust more, that you want to take them into your lab. So this is regardless of anything you're doing, being able to set up calls, even if not with the professors themselves, with people who are in the same lab, who can answer your questions, give you a sense of what the lab is like, what the community is like, and help you within what the specific lab is looking for you to hone in your application towards it. I'd say this is very useful and very important. When it comes to research experience, if you are able through your university to do research, this is really important. I know a lot of folks apply and have startup experience and industry experience, and this is great. But if you're applying for PhD, having proven that you've done actual research, you've published papers, for example, or you've just been involved in research projects, that if I'm a professor and I'm going to take you in, you're going to be able to be independently able to work. You're going to be able to publish papers. Me having the confidence in seeing that would be good. So you don't have to do that in the US. You can do that in, I believe you mentioned India. You can do that in India. You can do that in other places. And you could also do exchange programs. So this is something that is very helpful. I don't, off the top of my head, know full details about the different universities that do that, but there's a lot of places where you could reach out to the professors and be like, hey, I'm someone who's finishing up my master's somewhere. I'm very interested in being a visiting student in your lab for X amount of months. Would you be okay with me doing that? And you get sponsored on a temporary visa to do that. If you go through that route, you'd be able to already able to prove to the people that, hey, look at me, look at my work. You've seen me work in action. You can show your capabilities to them, and that would make your application even easier because, hey, they've worked with you. Not only they've had a call with you, so you don't have to do that to get accepted. All I'm saying are these are more possible ideas, that some people I've seen have done in the past. But I think reaching out to faculty and to people in the lab would be the first good step, and making sure you continue research even in your own institution or in separate projects. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's a great answer, Maya. And I just wanted to add on this, like, for example, if you don't get a response from a professor, don't be disappointed or take it personally, because they, they get a lot of emails. So sometimes they get overlooked. And sometimes if they are like, for example, your skill set is not like an exact fit for them, then they might not consider. But it's okay. You can just keep reaching out to other people. And these days, take advantage of LinkedIn because like people are very active there, and
Yeah.
they may overlook an email but may not overlook the LinkedIn contact. So please make use of that too.
Yeah, and this is why I was saying, reach out to students in the labs as well. Students are an easier way to talk to them. They would probably reply faster. You could
Yeah.
set up meetings, and then they can connect you to their advisors. So the advisor would have more, possibility of replying if it's coming from their own student. So just extra things to consider when you're reaching out. But and conferences. A ton of international conferences, meeting people face to face in conferences, having them hear your presenting your paper, presenting your research, and seeing the impact that it is, and talking to them after is huge. So there are some similar, things that you could definitely be part of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else has any questions or comments? I am happy that we also have Andre Lesha from Raytheon Technologies with us. He is an AIAA member and also a systems engineer at Raytheon. And he came, so I asked him to share a little bit about his experience. He doesn't have access to microphone, so he has pasted in the chat that he came a while ago here from Albania, and okay, I'll talk. My passion was space. Since I came in, I immigrated, and the path to citizenship was long. It took some time, but because I came as a child, all of it was during that period of time. And he did the BS in physics at Suffolk University and a certificate program in systems engineering at MIT, which definitely helped his career. And now he's able to get a position in the industry because he got the citizenship. He's working in the field of a space system and a space propulsion. So yeah, that's a good story. And of course, there are ways with which you can get the citizenship. I think one of the main concerns is also about belonging. So for example, as Antoine was becoming very happy to see Maya coming from his country and, achieving heights in this field. Similarly, like for example, there are still so many remote places all across the world, especially in underdeveloped or developing countries. There are like villages or rural areas where people don't have access to enough technology or news or information, and people don't even know about aerospace. And then out of the blue, somebody gets to know about aerospace engineering and they say, okay, I want to pursue a career in aerospace. And then the people in the family will say, what even that is? I don't
Yeah.
want you to go in that field. So, one of the examples of that have been myself, because when I was growing up, my parents came from a farming background and they had just moved to the city when I was born, and they were not aware of all these advanced technology work, and they were like, okay, you can just study until 12th standard, or maybe complete some graduation and get married and get settled. But then that time it was really hard to convince them that no, I really want to do this. And they were like, oh, it's a male dominated field, and all my extended family also thought like that. So yeah, I mean, sometimes in the very beginning, you have to convince a lot of people and you have to be very determined, because if you convince everybody and you don't get it, then that also is a disappointment for life. So
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like you're holding, you're not just trying to prove to yourself that you're doing a good job or that you succeeded. You're trying to constantly, your life is about proving to everyone who,
yeah,
doubted that you can do that to actually prove that you succeeded. And that's common and it's very not disappointing, but it's such a shame that we have to go through that in order to get somewhere. But this also highlights the power of stories and the power of storytelling, because a big part, again, of what motivated me to see that there is a possibility of coming here was seeing someone from Lebanon at that time when I was in high school,
yeah.
leading the efforts at JPL. And I was like, there is a chance, very minimum, but there is a chance. And
Yeah.
people seeing yourself coming from, a different background, and, doing your postdoc and research at MIT and other places, and doing WeLEAP, and seeing these kind of role model, or like someone to aspire to, or seeing a story that, you could relate to, and you feel like that's something that you could do, is very important. It's incredibly important. And I'm happy that more countries are slowly but surely trying to start getting there. So yeah. And WeLEAP is one of the great examples of bringing these communities together. So kudos to your work as well.
Thanks for your kind words. Yeah, I mean, it's very important to see some role models in your field. For me also, it was Kalpana Chawla, who was an Indian origin astronaut. And that time when I was doing, I think, 8th or 9th standard, there was this Columbia space shuttle disaster, and everybody got to know about her. And I was like, oh, she can become an astronaut. Maybe I can also go in aerospace. So with this platform, our goal, one of the goals is also to highlight, like the leaders in aerospace and related fields, so that people from all across the nation know that it is possible, even though there are all these difficulties, restrictions, limitations, and some people don't have family support, but you can still make a mark. You have that in you. If you are dreaming about it, that means you have the potential in you. So just keep going and find your cohort. I would say use all the social media networking and all to make it work, but always be determined. That's all. Like, I'm just giving a lot of suggestions, but I think that's all we can do right now to inspire others. It's mainly like the person, they have to keep going, right? They have to.
Yeah, and finding champions and the field that finding champions in the field that are willing to put the effort to help you. I think that's important. It's not something, some of us, are lucky to have had that, and not everyone does. So
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is a great discussion. I hope it helps some of the people attending and listening to it.
Yeah, thank you so much. We are very sure that at least 1 or 2 people will be helpful, maybe more. And then at least we can say that we accomplished something. So thank you again, Maya, for giving your time and effort into this. And thanks to all the attendees. You have been wonderful. We will be sharing the video recording later in next week. So stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for more sessions like this. Thank you again. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.